met Yonk one afternoon at a waterfront bar on Atlantic Avenue. He said I looked terrible. Thanks, Yonk. Have some wine. Only one glass. I have a million papers to correct. I informed Yonk about my problem. I am too easy. People do not respect easy teachers. I want them to earn their grades. I have respect. Hundreds of people want my classes, which bothers me. One mother begged me to let her daughter join my class. She even asked me to spend the weekend with her. I said no. Yonk shook his head, admitting that I wasn't always so smart. If I didn't relax a little, I'd soon be a miserable old man. I should learn to spread a little happiness. A weekend with the mother, a promising writing future for her young daughter. What is the matter with you? There wouldn't be any respect. Never mind respect. Enjoy another glass of wine. Chapter 17. The Dinner Conversation. Before Stuyvesant, my job was to keep students from misbehaving. There was no noisy behavior, no flying sandwiches, no shoving or shouting. There are no excuses for not teaching. If you did not deliver, you would lose their respect. The students never stopped attempting to steer me away from traditional English, but I knew their tactics. I continued to tell stories, but I was learning to connect them to characters from literature. I was discovering my own voice and teaching style. I was gaining comfort in the classroom, and at Stuyvesant, I was free to use any teaching method I wanted. I taught them about music and food. If they complained about studying serious poems, I would sing them children's songs or tell them stories. Soon, more serious writers connected the ideas from these songs and stories to more complex concepts. The method appeared to work. The students weren't aware they were studying. They thought they were simply talking about life. When a lesson became boring and students began to ask for the restroom, I initiated a conversation about dinner. James, what did you eat for dinner last night? Chicken. Where has it come from? What do you mean? Did someone buy it, James, or did it fly into the window? My mother bought it. So your mother does the shopping? Well, yeah. Is she working? Yeah, she's a legal secretary. Who cooks the chickens? My mother. So what are you doing while your mother is in the kitchen? I am in my room. Doing what? Homework or listening to music. And what is your father doing? Watching the news on TV. Who helps your mother in the kitchen? Mr. McCourt, I'm not sure why you're asking me all these questions. They are so boring. I turned to face the class. What do you think this is a writing course? Have you learned anything about James or his family? Is there any story here? Jessica? My mother would never tolerate that sort of behavior. James and his father receive royal treatment. I would like to know who washes the dishes. No, I don't need to ask. It's the mother. I was having a dime and turned to Daniel. Daniel, what did you have for dinner last night? French-style chicken with baby potatoes and Italian wine. Did your mom prepare the meal? No, the servant did. Oh, the servant. And what did your mother do? She was with my father. So the servant cooked and served the dinner? That's right. So you ate alone? Yes, Dot, that's right, Dot. Did you have music playing in the background? Yes. I listened to Telemann for 20 minutes. He is one of my father's favorites. When it was over, I called my father. And where was he? He's at Sloan Kettering Hospital. My mother is with him all the time because he is dying. Oh, Daniel, I apologize. Why haven't you told me? I was wrong to ask you so many questions. It does not matter. Regardless of what we say, he will die. It was quiet in the classroom. What would I say to Daniel now? I played my little game. I had been a smart, funny teacher. Daniel had been patient. Details about his lonely dinner permeated the classroom. His father was present. We waited beside a bed with Daniel's mother. We'd always remember the French-style chicken, the servant, and Daniel alone at the gleaming, expensive table as his father died. Chapter 18. Problems with Parents. On open school day, the children are sent home at noon, and the parents return from 1 to 3 p.m., and again from 7 to 9 p.m. Teachers are exhausted after speaking with hundreds of parents throughout the day. There are 3,000 students at the school, which should equate to 6,000 parents. But this is New York, where nearly half of the families are separated. So there could be 10,000 adults, mothers and fathers with their new partners. They are all convinced that their children are the world's smartest. They have high expectations for their children and will only be satisfied if they achieve them. Stanley's parents have separated and do not get along. I'm not surprised Stanley has emotional issues. The mother lives in a 6-room apartment on the Upper West Side. Dad lives in a small, dirty apartment in the Bronx. Stanley spends half of the week with his mother and half with his father, but he's upbeat about it. He's good at math, and he views his life as a mathematical problem. If a 3.5 and B 3.5, what is Stanley? Maureen McSherry is my monitor for open school night. She informs me that Stanley's mother and father are waiting to see me. Maureen adds that there are 6 more couples who refuse to sit next to one another, all of whom are fighting and want to speak with me. Rhonda, Stanley's mother, smells like tobacco. She warns me not to believe anything Stanley's father tells me. She feels sorry. Stanley has a terrible father. How is Stanley doing in school? That's fine. He's a good writer and popular among the other kids. What a surprise with such a stupid father. When Stanley is with me, I give him my full attention. But he is extremely upset about having to spend 3.5 days a week with his father. He started staying out at night. He claims he is staying with friends, but I do not believe him. I know he has a girlfriend whose parents don't mind what they do. I am afraid I don't know anything about that. I'm just his teacher, and it's impossible to get into the private lives of 175 students. A few minutes later, I'm talking with Stanley's father, Ben. He says, I heard what she said. He laughs and shakes his head. But let us not talk about her. I'm having this problem with Stanley right now. I've spent all of this money on his education. And do you know what he wants to do? he wants to travel to New England and study guitar. Tell me, how much money can you make playing the guitar? I told him that I would not let him. We agreed from the beginning that he would work in finance. There was no doubt about that. I mean, what am I working for? A guitar player? No, sir. Get your degree and play the guitar in your spare time, I advise him. He cries. He says he is going to live with his mother. I would not want my worst enemy to do that, so I was wondering if you could speak with him. I know he enjoys your class, discussing food and whatever else you do here. I would like to help, but I am not a guidance counselor. I am an English teacher. Well, it doesn't matter. Tell me how he's doing. He's doing well. The bell rings, and Maureen, who isn't shy, announces that there is no more time. She'd be delighted to take the names and phone numbers of anyone who wishes to meet me another time. She passes around a sheet of paper that no one writes on. They want my attention right now. They'd waited half the night while these other crazy people talked about their troubled children. Of course, the children have problems. Just look at their parents. They follow me angrily down the hall, asking how Adam is, Sergey, Juan, and Naomi. What kind of school is this where you can't even speak with the teacher for a minute? What do we pay taxes for? At 9 o'clock, the teachers leave to go get a drink. We sit at a table in the back of the neighborhood bar and order large glasses of beer. We've been talking all night, so our mouths are dry. I tell the other teachers that in my entire time at Stuyvesant, only one parent, a mother, has ever asked me if her son is enjoying school. I agreed because he appeared to be having a good time. She smiled, stood up, and said, "Thank you," before leaving. One parent in all those years. They only care about success and money. Money, adds Connie, another educator. They have high hopes for their children. We are like factory workers. Our job is to prepare their children to perform for parents and employers. A group of parents enter the bar. One approaches me. "This is nice," she says. "You have time to drink beer, but no time for a parent who waited half an hour to see you." I tell her I'm sorry. She angrily rejoins her group at another table. I'm so tired that I drink too much and stay in bed the next morning. Why didn't I simply tell that mother to go to hell? Chapter 19. Bob and Kenneth. In my class, Bob Stein never sat at a desk. Perhaps he was too big for it, but he preferred to sit in the window seat in the back of the room. When he was relaxed, he smiled and waved. "Good morning, Mr. McCourt. Isn't this a wonderful day?" He dressed the same way all year, a white shirt open at the neck, a gray jacket, short pants, thick gray socks, and yellow builder's boots. He carried no bag, books, notebooks, or pens. He joked that it was my fault because I had once enthusiastically discussed Thoreau. I had said that the simple life was best. Everyone should discard what they own. When I gave the class written assignments, he always asked to borrow a pen and paper. "Hi, Bob. This is a writing class. You need a pen and paper." He reassured me not to worry. Snow was falling on my head, he explained. I should enjoy my final few years of life." The students laughed, but he assured them he was not joking. In a year, he said, I'd look back on this moment, and I'd wonder why I was wasting my time and emotions over the lack of his pen and paper. I had to play the role of the serious teacher. "Bob, you could fail this class if you don't do the work." "Mr. McCourt, I can't believe you're telling me this, given your miserable childhood in Ireland. But it's okay. If you fail me, I will retake the course. There's no hurry. Another year or two will not matter. For you, perhaps but I am only 17. I have all the time in the world." He asked the class if they could lend him a pen and paper. There were 10 offers, but he accepted them from Jonathan Greenberg, who was sitting next to him. He didn't want to get down from his window seat. He said, "Do you see how nice people are?" "Mr. McCourt, if other people bring big bags, you and I won't have to worry about supplies." "Yes, Bob, however, that will not help you next week when we have the big test on Gilgamesher." "What's that, Mr. McCourt?" "It's the world literature book. Oh, yes, I remember that book. Big book. I have it at home, and my father is reading bits about the Bible. You should know that my father is a Jewish leader. He was overjoyed you gave us that book. He said you must be an excellent teacher." I told him you were a great teacher, except you were too concerned about pens and paper. "That is enough, Bob. You have not even looked at the book." He assured me that his father frequently discussed the book, so I did not need to worry. Bob would learn everything about Gilgamesh before the big test. Bob one said over the sound of the class laughing. "It would make me happier if you read the book yourself. One love to, but it doesn't fit into my plans. What are your plans, Bob?" "I'm going to be a farmer." He smiled, waved his pen and paper, and apologized for causing disruption in the classroom. Bob was prepared to work. He suggested that everyone in the class do the same. But before we get started, he'd like to clarify that he doesn't dislike world literature. He just liked reading farming magazines. Farming was more complicated than most people thought. Jonathan Greenberg raised his hand and asked why farming was so complicated. Bob appeared unhappy for a moment. "This is my dad. I told him that I wanted to be a pig farmer. I like pigs. I do not intend to eat them, but I would like to farm and sell them. What is wrong with that? They're really nice little animals and can be very friendly. I told my father I'd marry and have children, and they'd enjoy the baby pigs. He almost went insane, and my mom had to go lie down. Maybe I was wrong to tell them, but they always taught me to be honest." The doorbell rang. Bob climbed down from his window seat and handed Jonathan the pen and paper. He mentioned that his father would be visiting me during open school night next week. He apologized for ruining the lesson. "It is going to kill my wife. If he wants to be a farmer, he must pay for himself," we told him. "He tells us not to worry because large government programs pay for people like him to study agriculture." "We are losing him, Mr. McCourt? Our son is no longer with us. We are Jewish. We can't have our son living with pigs every day. I'm sorry, Mr. Stein. 6 years later, Bob and I met on Lower Broadway. It was a January day, but he was still dressed in his Orson Welles jacket and shorts. He said, "Hello, Mr. McCourt, isn't it a great day?" "It's freezing, Bob." He told me he worked for a farmer in Ohio, but not with pigs. He decided not to because it would devastate his parents. I told him it was a good and loving decision. He paused and looked at me. "Mr. McCourt, you did not like me, did you?" "Never liked you." "Are you joking? It was a pleasure to have you in my classroom. Jonathan said you brought sunshine into the room." And tell him how beautiful he was and is in every way. How you loved him then and love him now. Tell him that I did, and he was speechless. I hugged him. Let the people on Lower Broadway laugh at the sight of the high school teacher hugging the large Jewish future farmer of America, I thought. I didn't care. Ken was a Korean boy who hated his father. He had to take piano lessons, although his family had no piano. His father made him practice on the kitchen table until they could afford a real piano. If he didn't practice correctly, his father hit him across the fingers with a large metal spoon. His 6-year-old sister, too. When they got a real piano, his sister played a silly pop song on it. Her father was so angry that he threw her clothes on the fire. At Stuyvesant High School, Ken obeyed his father in everything until he had to choose a college. His father wanted him to go to Harvard. Everyone in Korea knew about Harvard, the most famous university in America. Ken said no. He wanted to go to Stanford in California. He wanted to live as far away from his father as possible. His father said no. He would not allow that. Ken said if he didn't go to Stanford, he wouldn't go to college at all. The father was going to physically attack him in the kitchen, but he was afraid of Ken. Ken was bigger and stronger. The father walked away angrily. He didn't want his son to go to Stanford, but he'd be even more ashamed if his son didn't go to college at all. Ken wrote me from Stanford. He liked the sunshine there. College life was easier than Stuyvesant High School. There was less pressure. He just had a letter from his mother. She said he had to spend all his time working, and he mustn't join any clubs or do any other extra activities. If he didn't get grade A for everything, she wouldn't allow him to come home for Christmas. Ken didn't mind. He didn't want to come home for Christmas. He came home only to see his sister. His father knew almost no English and spent every working day and night selling fruit and vegetables. He badly wanted his children to get the education he had never had. In an English class at Stanford, Ken was asked by the professor to talk about his favorite poem. Ken remembered a poem he'd studied in my class, My Father. While he was talking about it, he suddenly started crying in front of all the other students. The professor put his arm around Ken's shoulder and led him down the hallway to his office. He stayed an hour in the professor's office, talking and crying. The professor said it was okay. He had a father who he hadn't liked, a cruel Polish Jew. His father had almost died in a German prison camp in World War II. He'd come to California and managed a food store to pay for his 3 children's education. The professor said their two fathers would have a lot to talk about together, but that would never happen. The Korean grocer and polished Jewish food store manager could never find the words that come so easily in a university. Ken said he felt much better after talking to his professor. Now he was going to buy his father a tie for Christmas and his mother some flowers. Yeah, it was crazy buying her flowers because they sold them in the store. But there was a big difference between flowers from a Korean grocery store and flowers from a real flower store. He couldn't forget one thing his professor had said. The world should let the polished Jewish father and the Korean father sit in the sun with their wives. Ken laughed over how excited the professor became. Just let them sit in the sun. But the world won't let them because there's nothing more dangerous than letting old men sit in the sun. They might be thinking, and it's the same with kids. Keep them busy, or they might start thinking. 20th chapter. Last day in school. And in a great acceptance speech will thank you, their teacher, for everything. You'll be asked to stand and you'll be loudly cheered. This will be your time in the sun, your reward for thousands of lessons. Your prize winner hugs you, and you return quietly to the streets of New York, down the stairs to your small apartment, some dry bread in the cupboard, a bottle of water in the refrigerator, a small yellow light hanging over your single bed. A young part-time teacher sits beside me in the teacher's cafeteria. She is going to start her full-time teaching career in September, so could I offer her any advice? Find what you love and do it. That's my advice. It's true, I didn't always love teaching. It was too difficult. You're alone in the classroom, one man or woman in front of 5 classes of teenagers every day. You have to find ways of surviving. They may like you, they may even love you, but they're young. It's the business of young people to push old people off the stage. A teacher's life is similar to the life of a professional fighter. One bad fight, and that's the end of your career. But if you're smart and patient, you'll learn the tricks. It's hard, but you have to make yourself comfortable in the classroom. You have to be selfish. Like on an airplane in an emergency, you must help yourself before you can help the children. The classroom is a difficult but exciting place. You'll never know the effect you've had on the hundreds of children you teach. You see them leaving the classroom dreamy, impolite, smiling, admiring, puzzled. After a few years, you learn to read their minds quickly. You wouldn't exist for long in this job if you didn't. You're with the kids, and if you want to be a teacher, there's no escape. Don't expect help from the management, those people who have escaped from the classroom. They're busy going to lunch and thinking higher thoughts. It's you and the kids, so there's the bell. See you later. Find what you love and do IT. It was April and sunny outside. I wondered how many more Aprils I'd spend as a teacher. Didn't they wonder about that? Didn't they say, why does he talk so much about writing when he's never done it himself? It was time to stop working. I wouldn't have much money, but I could read all the books I'd missed in the last 30 years. I'd spend hours at the 42nd Street Library, my favorite place in New York. I'd walk the streets, have a beer, talk to my friends, learn the guitar, take my daughter Maggie for dinner in Greenwich Village, write in my notebooks. Something might happen. When Guy Lind was a second-year student, he brought his umbrella to school on a snowy day. He met a friend on the second floor who also had an umbrella. They began a playful fight with their umbrellas, but his friend fell and the end of his umbrella went through Guy's eye and into his brain. They took Guy to Beth Israel Hospital across the street, and then from city to city and country to country. They even took him to Israel, where they have the most modern treatment because of all the fighting. Guy returned to school in a wheelchair, wearing a piece of black material over one eye. After a short time, he managed to walk with the help of a walking stick. As more time passed, he didn't need the stick, and he looked completely normal except for the black cloth over his eye and an arm that he couldn't move. It was my last day as a teacher. Guy sat listening to Rachel Blostein talking about poems. She enjoyed reading them, but she couldn't write them. Why? Because she had nothing to write about. Everything in her life was perfect. Her parents were happy and successful. Rachel was their only child, and she was going to Harvard University. She had no problems. Someone said, "Why can't I have no problems?" Then Guy told the class about his experiences in the last 2 years. He'd suffered, but he wouldn't want to change anything about his past. He'd met many people in many hospitals whose lives had been completely destroyed by illness and accidents. This was their last high school class in mind. There were tears when Guy told his story. It reminded us all to think of the good things in our lives. The bell rang, and they all said goodbye to me. I was told to have a good life. I wished them the same. As I left the classroom for the last time, a voice called out to me, "Hey, Mr. McCourt, you should write a book. I'll try." The end.